First question. I'm turning around looking at this from behind, but we'll rotate who will address the first question. So we'll see how that goes. And just by the way, I have provided each of the candidates with these questions, so I do expect a little bit of informed response. Is, like most inner urban areas, including the CBD, Richmond streets deal with the daily influx of vehicle traffic commuting to work. Cremorne's already at capacity and destined to get worse. Would you actively promote any carrot and or stick strategies to encourage commuters to leave their cars at home? Perhaps we'll start with Roz for this one.
Hello, thanks for inviting me. I also want to acknowledge that we're on Indigenous land that always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and pay my respect to elders past and present. I'm a socialist, a Victorian socialist. I've been an activist for a very long time, since high school. I'm a teacher educator at Deakin University in health education, and I'm a parent, and I'm a driver and a cyclist and a user of public transport, and I agree that car use is out of control, and especially in areas like this, it's really noticeable, it's dangerous, it's highly polluting. And our answer to that, like my answer, and you're going to find a theme in all of my answers, is that we should make decisions on the basis of people before profit. And one of the things that makes profit in Victoria is the public transport system, subsidised by the Victorian state government, $2.7 billion a year that goes to public transport providers like Metro for them to make a profit on top of that. So our major policy around transport is to bring public transport back into full public ownership and to make public transport free. So I know all the other parties are coming up with $1, $2, whatever. Our policy is free public transport, paid for by the state government, across all networks, and major upgrades to all of those networks, which particularly, I don't know here, we'll talk about Richmond Station, but in some of the outer suburbs, the lack of kind of crossways rather than the arterial routes is a ridiculous barrier to people using public transport. So if you had a fully funded public transport system, you could have much better services that would hopefully be the carrot that inspires people to get on the bus, get on the train, or get on the bike to stay home.
Just before we go,
Yes.
I stuffed up a little bit. I did invite initially advised them to introduce themselves a little bit more before they ask the questions. You've sort of started doing that, so what I'll do is, rather than 1 minute, I'll give you 2 minutes to, if this makes sense, to answer the question but introduce yourself as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Did I already go over it?
I'll give you that.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't really try to not go on. So yeah, the other place that you might have heard my name before, just as part of my introduction, is because of the Safe Schools program. So I was the co-founder and creator of Safe Schools, which started in 2010, which was a program to support gender and sexual diversity in schools. That's really one of my major passions. That program was really viciously attacked by the Murdoch media and conservative politicians, people like Corey Bernardi and a bunch of others. So I was very much targeted by that conservative backlash. So my name came up in the media a lot around that time. The Australian wrote 100,000 words, all of which were negative about me because I wanted to stop homophobia and transphobia in schools. I stand by every single piece of work that I did in Safe Schools Coalition. I'm proud of it. And I'm happy that a lot of young people actually come up to me and say, thank you so much for the work that you've done. It made a huge difference in my school. So that still happens 12 years later. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren O'Dwyer, the Labor candidate. Nagam Yoyomiya and Gana. I'm a Yoyoda woman and mother. So I moved to Melbourne for uni some decades ago from country Victoria. I was the first in my family to not only go to uni but to finish high school. So education and access to education and pathways there is pretty big on my list of priorities. My first job whilst putting myself through uni was pulling up beers at a local pub, and I'm now the Associate Director of First Nations Foundations at Arts Centre Melbourne. My daughter and I have made a home for ourselves in Fitzroy. She goes to a local school in there. I'm a coach of under 10s footy at Fitzroy Juniors Footy Club. Hoping to maintain that role, maybe step down to the under 9s, a bit more of a challenge next year, and on board at PBS radios. And one of the things I love the most is about using those bits of community and helping them to foster a better and more proud society. Beautiful, perfectly timed. So the way that we fix this is through delivering positive and proactive measures that help us as locals to be a part of the solution. So it's very much a carrot, not a stick. So as you mentioned, this is something that's being seen across a lot of urban areas. And what the current government has done is start with the works that will have the greatest impact right across the grid, so Melbourne Metro and Suburban Rail Loop. So this may not be directly on the doorsteps of Cremorne, but in terms of its impact, it will be significant for us as locals. It's going to be getting creative space for 500,000 commuters on the morning peak daily commute. And collectively, these works project getting 1 million car trips off the road every day.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Dietri. I'm the Greens candidate for Richmond. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'd like to pay my respects to Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people who are the sovereign owners of the land that we're meeting on today. I'm the former mayor. I'm a parent of 2, and I've always fought for this community. Whether it's as an artist and activist leading divestment movements from the immigration detention industry or the fossil fuels industry, or fighting against the East-West toll road, which is one of the major struggles in recent years of our local community. I became frustrated about shouting from the sidelines, trying to get other people in positions of power to make better decisions. So in 2020, I put my hand up for local government, and I became and I was elected the first Greens mayor of the first Greens majority government anywhere in the world. I was really proud of some of the things we achieved on Yarra Council. We transitioned 13 of our community centres off gas to 100% renewable energy. We invested in 7 new green open spaces, some of which are here in Cremorne. But I realised that there were systemic problems at the state level that needed addressing, bigger fights to ensure that we have a climate-safe, equitable future for everyone. So I'm putting my hand up for state government to have those fights to get out of coal and gas and to make sure we have housing affordability. In terms of transport here in Cremorne, getting cars off the road, I think it's a carrot and a stick deal. Let's talk about walking. Let's talk about improving our footpaths, creating more of a tree canopy so it's cool to walk under. Let's talk about riding. I'm a passionate bike rider. We need to invest in protected bike lanes because 78% of our population want to ride more but don't because they don't find it safe. So the Greens are committing to 15 kilometres of new protected bike lanes in the electorate, including some in Cremorne, and I love the idea of the one-way traffic loop that was discussed at the last meeting here of the Cremorne community, combined with new pop-up bike lanes in Cremorne.
Sorry, a bit taller. G'day, I'm Lucas Moon, known as Lucas. I grew up in the outer eastern suburbs, went to a good public school. Like a few of us here will remember, Jeff Kennett closed my school, so I've been Jeff, just like the rest of you. Straight after high school, I joined the military, spent about 5 years in the Australian Army, 5 full-time years and about 9 years part-time. Post-military, university, I studied accounting, business, I'm a CPA by trade, moved to Collingwood in about 2004, started a family, got 3 young kids, we all attend school, all 3 kids attend school, local public schools. Over the years, I've fallen into, some call themselves advocates, activists. I call myself an advocate, whether it be sitting on a board for a not-for-profit in the disability sector for 140 kids with disabilities, to fighting to keep the Tote Hotel open some 13 years ago. And also, I've enjoyed taking on Yarra Council over the years. I filled Town Hall, even before they were in the papers about taking them on. So I'd say that's how I fell into. One of the things I'm known for, and I've been attacked on all sides of the media, is getting a Royal Commission for my brothers and sisters veterans that were killing themselves in great numbers. I've campaigned for that for years and delivered that. But talking about public transport, onto the question in here, I think it's great. We've got the carrot. We've come up with a great policy of $2 and $1 travel. That will save you $7 a day, or $7.20 for those people that drive here. So that's our carrot approach. And to remind you, people are saying, trust us. We all know they've been in government for 18 of the last 22 years. So we've come up with a great carrot approach, and it's sensible at $1 a day for concession and $2 for full fare. So not only helps the cost of living, it will encourage people to get out of their cars and onto public transport, freeing up the road and better for the environment. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Cowen. I'm a recent party candidate for the seat of Richmond in the state election. I'm 22, I'm a flight attendant, and if elected I would be the youngest MP in Victoria. I ran also in the state, in the council elections in 2020, but I lost to Gary Shadforth. But I am running because I believe in truly representative democracy. I live with depression, anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I believe these are really important things to talk about, and I would like to see more of our MPs talking about things that matter. And we know there's a youth mental health crisis in Victoria, and I would like to be the voice for that. In terms of public transport, in terms of congestion in Cremorne, I would like to prioritise active and public transport. I would like to prioritise accessibility for all, so that everyone can use our public transport, because there are people deterred by the accessibility of our public transport. I'd like to make sure that as much space can be given back to the community and to have our spaces used as well as possible, so that we've got interactive art, we've got really vibrant spaces that we can all use and move through easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Second question. This is the Richmond Station one. Richmond Station is the biggest and most used train station in Melbourne. It's a significant transport hub for workers, tourists and users of the main sports precinct. It hasn't seen any upgrade for over 60 years, and we've seen crowds of rail users dangerously spilling out around narrow footpaths that surround Cremorne streets. Meanwhile, Vic Roads and Vic Track occupy all the adjacent land with car yards. What would you do to improve this facility in the short and the long term? You might start with Bob this one.
So I've worked across the sports and entertainment and arts precincts for a while now, and I'm a PT user for my usual daily commute into work, and it's pretty well known that I've got a deep love of my Aussie rules, so I'm personally pretty interested in this one too, and my response does link back a little bit to the previous question as well. So all of the Labor government's investment to date has been around maximising benefit, and that is what we've been looking to deliver. The first priority has been to unlock the city loop, given it is at capacity. So this is a staged approach that means that we unlock the grid first, and then move to how we maximise off Melbourne Metro with individual stations and their related projects. Melbourne Metro has been talked about for a long time, but this government has made a choice to actually deliver on it. So as of next year, test trains will be running on Melbourne Metro, and we're a year ahead of schedule. Our first ever trains from Park will get us to the airport. Like, this is, our state has never seen transport infrastructure and transport access like this in our day. Maximising benefit for the most people right across the state, easing the gridlock from within those inner urban areas, and stations like Richmond.
So Richmond Station is actually the 9th busiest station in metropolitan Melbourne, which is actually pretty significant given that there's quite a few kind of CBD stations, and it is absolutely not fit for purpose. It sees a huge number of people coming through. It hasn't been updated in 60 years. When I was mayor, I brought this issue to Minister Wynne time and time again, and Minister Wynne insisted that it was not a priority. For the people of Richmond, this station is a priority, and the Greens will commit a $500,000 investment to plan for a major redevelopment of the Richmond station. We need to make sure that it is accessible to everyone, fully Disability Discrimination Act compliant. We need to be able to ensure that it's accessible from all locations, north, south, east and west at all times, not just when there's a major footy game on. It needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to be contemporary. It needs to be able to accommodate the growing population of Richmond. So a plan is not sexy, but it's a big project and we need to start planning for the future.
I agree. Richmond Station needs to be upgraded. Should have been upgraded years ago. I think it's just the current government can't decide what to do. It's too big out of their realm. 18 and 22 years we've upgraded Richmond. We need to see it connected to the MCG. We need to see it connected down into the city. We need to see it connected into Richmond and Cremorne. The station is right. It's not fit for purpose. It's old. It's tired. We've got the sporting precinct of the world, the sporting capital of the world. I've got one of the worst train stations in the world. Totally agree we need to update it. And if I'm elected, I'll be promoting to get it done and updated. I come from an infrastructure background, so I know how to get major projects moving. Not only that, I know how to get them done on time and on budget without throwing away another $1 billion on top of it. Thank you.
So I'm not from a major party, so I can't be making any funding pledges basically because I won't be in government. But I could be on the crossbench, which would bring a lot of attention to the electorate, which I definitely advocate for an upgrade of Richmond Station. It really needs to be fit for purpose, and it really isn't at this stage. I would like the priority to be actually on locals as opposed to MCG goers. Ensuring accessibility and usability for our locals around it, and also making sure that we've got integrated transport options within the station so that people can go from various modes of transport, connect at the station and go to their final destination.
I feel like it's a bit harsh to say it's one of the worst stations in the world. Obviously it needs improving, everyone said that. I've just got a couple of suggestions for how you could fund it. Here's one. Crown Casino pays $1 a year rent for its premises. $1 a year to the state government. If they had to pay a proper amount to rent that land, we'd be looking at $290 million a year from Crown Casino. They've got the money to pay for it. If you put a property tax on the most luxury 1% of properties at 5% of their value currently in Victoria, which is about 25,000 houses, you could raise $1.5 billion. Spend it on Richmond Station, spend it on every station. $1,500 million that is, on the value of the richest 25,000 houses in this state. These people do not need that extra few million on top of the other millions that they have. Who needs that much money? They don't need it. There's plenty of money out there to fund this stuff. We all agree Richmond Station needs an upgrade. People got to find the money, get the money, and get it done.
Thank you again. Third question. Yarra Council has recently installed 2 pocket parks in response to a long-acknowledged dearth of public space in Cremorne. There's a welcome inclusions, but they're not much bigger than a standard nature strip in the suburbs. The council was restricted by the amount of land they actually control. The significant amount of land in Cremorne is owned by Vic Road, Vic Track, and the Department of Education. Recently, a significant parcel of land is sold off by Vic Track to private developers. What would you do to promote the release of such land holdings and those of large private developments to contribute to the health of the community with their part of true public open space?
These are great questions, by the way. They hit on exactly what I love to talk about. Open space is so important. We know that it's actually the number one thing that people in these neighbourhoods value. And the pandemic really reinforced our need and our love of our open spaces. And yet the Labor state government has sold off 578 hectares of state public land to private property developers in Victoria between 2000 and 2018. Like the parcel that was recently sold off by Vic Track to a private developer. Labor is too cosy with the developers, Liberals are too cosy with the developers, and we need to end this special treatment of developers that sees these deals done between the government and private property developers for high-end luxury apartments. Meanwhile, we're not investing in the services, in the public transport, in the open space that we need to accommodate a growing population. So there's one example here, which is the state government actively standing in the way with a project by the council to put a developer levy to be able to acquire new open space for Cremorne. And this has been sitting on the minister's desk for 5 months, refusing to sign off on this deal. Thank you.
Yeah, fundamentally, I think we're lacking the open space around here, and as we saw, the Labor government has taken about 18,000 square metres of open space in Richmond and Collingwood. They took the only sporting oval available to build more buildings. So I don't think it's in their interest around here. The reason Yarra Council hasn't built more parks here is because they're broke. That's why. That's the only reason. Yarra Greens and Central Place broke. The state government is broke. That's why they're selling off land. It's Crown land. It belongs to us. And that's why Big Track's selling it off, because they're broke. No other reason. If I'm elected, I'll make sure that Crown land belongs to us, and I'll advocate for it to be transferred over to Yarra to deliver open space, but with strong conditions. Yarra will have to deliver. Thank you.
I live in an apartment. I've got a greyhound, so public spaces, open spaces like these public parks are so important to me. I'm so excited. There's one coming in on a street in Collingwood near me really soon, so really exciting. And something that's actually really important to our the amenity of our streets. Something I advocated for in the council elections was an increased contribution by developers to public space, and I think that has to be part of the solution. What my priority would be is keeping the publicly owned land in the hands of the government so that we can use it as best as possible. I'd like to look at an audit of publicly owned lands to make sure that we are using it as effectively as possible, ensuring that, number one, we have public open space, we have social and affordable housing as my main priorities for land usage in Richmond. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, one of the things with the privatisation of big roads was a question about the land, but you see the land is staying in state ownership. So again, it comes down to a question of priorities with that land. And if you're always thinking about where to make a profit from developers, or you're thinking about the budget priorities of the state government that are skewed towards the rich and powerful, then you're not thinking about sustainability, then you're not thinking about social equity. And you can make all of these plans, and people say such great sentiments, like over and over again, and they write it down, and they use, government speak language to talk about it. But when it comes down to it, somebody has to mandate, have the guts to say, we are mandating that this land can never be developed on, it has to be made free. And we're going to put this money towards doing that. It's like you read years and years of these planning documents and statements and things, so people know the issues. Somebody has to say, we're going to make it law and we're going to pay for it. And I just think, I feel very cynical about anyone really doing that.
I think I need to choose my phone book for all of these developers that I'm currently friends with. So there's a bit to this question, so I'll start with what's being delivered lately. So it's the Labor government that have delivered funding to this council for those new parks that have been developed, and ensure that public and open spaces are included as one of the 4 core themes in the Cremorne Place Implementation Plan. I've certainly spoken to a lot of you locally about this issue, and to my colleagues in depth about the responses needed, and obviously it's intricate, but one of the things that I've been pleased to announce lately is a new $500,000 for a re-elected Labor government for dog parks right across the electorate, particularly multi-use dog parks. So it's making sure that we're maximising the use of our local space. It's not just for dogs, but it's also for our local community sporting groups, our local schools, and everybody else that uses these parks. Through my professional life, I've had direct experience in working on planning scheme amendments designed to honour the character of a particular area and forcing developers to contribute and maintain the culture and creativity that an area is known for, and the residents and developers may wish to build in that area, and I look forward to giving those skills to Cremorne.
Okay, next question, question 4. The state government contributes contributed significantly to the production of the Cremorne Place Implementation Plan, which included authorities such as the City of Yarra and its implementation. Apart from funding for a digital tech hub, there does not seem to be any further state resourcing to implement any of its recommendations. The City of Yarra is seeking actively state government support to invest in the streetscape and public realm, and connectivity, and deliver significant new open space. Would you support this, and how would you make it happen?
Yeah, thanks. So I absolutely support the plan. To be clear, I had a meeting with the Green Mayor and didn't ask me at all to help fund this. So I just wanted to be clear to the room. But I did read it online, and you questioned. Absolutely, we need to get on with the plan here. There's a detailed plan put out in front of us. We need to start progressing. So I'll absolutely promote that. And I'll represent Richmond to make sure we get our fair share of money to get Cremorne moving and start this plan integrated so we can get the livability across this suburb a lot better. But to be very clear, the Greens Council did not ask me to help fund this. Thank you.
I also support the Cremorne Place Implementation Plan. I think the state government have done a good job at developing the digital tech hub so far, but I think a lot of the focus now comes into the hands of the City of Yarra in developing a lot of those active and public transport sort of investments, as well as open space investments. But I think the City of Yarra has to be supported by the state government financially to be able to deliver those things, and that's what I would advocate for.
Look, I have to be honest, I read it today and I learned some new words and some new terms, including unicorn company. Has anyone got that one? So it's a startup that's worth $1 billion. Unicorn presumably because it's very rare, maybe. Innovation anchor. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I thought, I grew up in England, so sometimes I just automatically switch into like Cockney rhyming slang. Innovation anchor, I'll let you work that one out. But yeah, I mean, again, it's a lot of good words on paper, and I guess my thing is still the priorities of social equity and sustainability have not been evidenced in the Labor government's priorities. They haven't been evidenced in previous Liberal governments. I don't think they will be in a Liberal government. And so, yeah, I mean, I support people's efforts to try to do a bunch of this stuff, but I think there's always this thing where every square inch of land, and particularly around here, you feel it is literally the square inches. There's this sort of sense of who can make a profit out of this.
Would we support this and how we make it happen? Yes. Our current investment is $12 million. My advice is that the state yet to see a detailed funding ask from the local council regarding what they need for the next stages of investment. So I assume they'll already be using the already established Yarra Activity Centre Standing Advisory Committee, which is probably the longest committee name in history, to complete their work. So it's a transparent process of developing those controls before they put the funding ask to the state. With regards to pedestrian wayfinding and open space, our built environment, especially footpaths, is obviously increasingly inaccessible. The Yarra Council have a dedicated developer contribution fund for this. So I'd be interested to see how it's currently utilised, and if they've spent it elsewhere or need more funding, then I'm sure a re-elected government would look forward to receiving their ask. Personally, I've worked on the early stages of the Melbourne Arts Precinct transformation, another city-shaping precinct, and I know that we need a nuanced balance that represents all parties and needs, including the residents, to be represented to get this right.
So the Cremorne Place Implementation Plan is an exciting new vision. I was really proud to launch it alongside Minister Wynne in 2021. But it is only exciting if we fund it in its entirety. It would be to its detriment if we were to focus on the profit-making, corporate, private advantages that see the innovation concentrated in that way, while neglecting the amenity of the space and the residents who live here. So we need to make sure that the public amenity is funded at the same time as a huge investment in increasing the number of workers that come into Cremorne, increasing the amount of built form in the area, we need to make sure that we strike a balance. So increasing open green space, working with the Kangan Institute to fund education programs, to fund new civic spaces in Cremorne, and working on our transport infrastructure, as we've mentioned before, pedestrian amenity, cycling and public transport.
Question 5. The local Kangan TAFE is a prominent presence in Cremorne and occupies an extensive area and could be a very significant resource for the local community. There's a willingness from Kangan to have a stronger connection, but relies greatly on having to raise its own funds. Would you support resourcing Cremorne's Kangan campus to link with local residents and business as a community educational facility?
Sorry, mixing my questions up in the wrong order. Yes. The answer is yes. Sorry. I'll just leave it with that. Yes.
That is a refreshing answer to a question, isn't it? Yeah, well, education is obviously a passion of mine, and the underinvestment in public education is a real crime, I think, in Victoria. I was talking to Gary Foley once, and I am deliberately name-dropping quite an amazing Aboriginal activist, and he was telling me this story of when he used to be involved in a college up near Northland. It was called Northern College. And they decided one day, because they didn't have proper sports facilities, that they would get their minibus and they would drive down to Scotch College and they would try to just play football on their ovals. And they went down there. They came out, they were like, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Oh, well, it's public money that paid for your footy ovals, right? So we should be able to play on them." And they really didn't know what to do with them. Like, this kind of thing, I think, just highlights, again, why are we funding public schools for their extra equestrian centre and swimming pool when there are public institutions and public TAFEs that are potential centres of community activity, places where young people's lives can be transformed. And actually, I did some professional learning with the Kangan teachers around gender and sexual diversity, and there's heaps of opportunities there as well.
Hey Roz, did you know that Gary Foley moved into the rental that I vacated most recently? We bonded over possums and chimneys. It's been great. So I'm really proud of what the Labor government has done to date in this space and delivered. We've provided the largest ever investment in TAFE, we've reopened doors, we've made some courses free. As I said before, I'm the first in my family to go to uni and finish high school. My dad benefited from adult education, my sister studied nursing as a mature age student, so I know intimately the impact that diverse education and access pathways can have on people's lives. Locally, we've delivered a revitalised Melbourne Polytechnic with a $40 million investment, and for me, one of the most exciting things about that, yes, it's in Collingwood, I'm getting to it.
That's the question.
And for me, one of the most exciting things about that is the opportunity for Polytechnic to integrate with the local community, opening up local streets, working with local businesses and residents. That's the type of thing that we just announced for Lionel Hall Community School. So we're going to be upgrading their netball courts, and with that comes an opportunity to work with Legs, Let's Enhance Bedell Street, and start to create that first stage of integrating with the local community. We've got a proven track record on this, and I look forward to doing it with Kangan.
So the Kangan Institute is absolutely champing at the bit to transform from a traditional hands-on engineering centre to being a state-of-the-art training centre for digital and creative innovation that can feed the local creative hub that Cremorne is about to be. But unfortunately, they have workshops that are just lying empty. They've been lying empty for years because they have been promised new investment in these new courses and that they just haven't seen. There is so much skill and so much potential in the Kangan Institute. So the Greens are committing to push for $10 million towards digital and creative transformation of the Kangan Institute to provide that state-of-the-art training at a TAFE level to feed employment in Cremorne and to feed that innovation boom. We're also pledging to support the transformation of their car park into a new civic space that can integrate with social enterprises, seating, greenery, so that everyone can use this public space and it can become a real hub.
Thank you.
We also think TAFE should be free for everyone, as should all education.
With Kangan, make it clear, I won't be removing the car parks, not enough around here to start with. But secondly, there is actually already digital integration with the local business. So I know Seek, car sales and real estate all have programs with Kangan. So surprised no one knew that or said it, but we need to expand on that. And we've got some of the best digital companies here in Australia and the world. We need to attract more, and we need to attract the best talent, and that's having a good training provider and Kangan. I believe we've got to modernise it, but we need to work with industry, not dictate to them, but partner with industry to give ourselves the best skills the world has it. I mean, this should be the San Francisco of Australia, or the Silicon Valley, or the Yarra Valley as they call it, this is the digital hub, and we've got to keep expanding those programs at Kangan to make sure we have the right digital skill set to take us into the modern world. Thank you.
I went to a private school just across the river actually, and to be honest, it's overfunded if that's possible for a school. I would support less funding for private schools and more funding for TAFE. That's where the best investment is, that's where the best bang for our buck is, and I would really support investment in the Kangan Institute and its integration into the local area. Thank you.
Thanks again. Last question from my little set. Cremorne is a diverse mix of businesses, residents, learners and visitors. They all have different priorities, but together they create a stimulating and collective environment. The zoning, however, only recognises separate commercial and residential areas and ignores the potential of mixing both. Is there a better way of zoning Cremorne that can see this diversity as an asset rather than a conflict?
Yeah, whenever I hear discussion of zoning, I'm always like, all the alarm bells, like Richmond's Bend, is it all the rezoning, suddenly heaps of Liberal Party mates got really rich. I mean, my biggest priority, again, people before profit. So the first thing I would say is, in Cremorne, there shouldn't be any vacant residencies. So anywhere that somebody could live, that no one's living, and they're making profit off just by having an empty apartment, which I'm sure there are plenty, should not be allowed to exist. There are 24,000 homeless people in Victoria, and there are 11.8% of homes that are vacant, that people hold on to as investment properties, as land banking, to make money out of. It makes no sense to me. I've only ever in my life lived in one house at a time. Why do we need more than one house per people who want to live in them? Like, literally. The talk about public housing is all a bit iffy too, in my opinion, and the zoning and the things about affordable was slipped from public to social to community to affordable, which mean very different things. So I think our main priority, or my main priority, and the thing that the Socialist Department would argue around is that people need places to live, they need affordable places to live, and that should be the first thing that you think about.
And I loved this question. It's so attuned to how eclectic the suburbs in this electorate are, such that you can literally turn a corner at points and find yourself in a completely different landscape. It's this that I love, and this that sets it apart from others, and this is what we need to protect. And one of the recurring pieces of feedback that I get from locals here is around the concerns that appropriate planning controls are not in place to guide height and form, that development and design overlays are not tight enough and give developers too much wiggle room, that existing planning scheme amendments pay no respect to the creativity and culture that make our local areas so great. So for me, I think the first thing we need to address is whether changing zones of Cremorne will actually fix the concerns raised and give us a chance to celebrate that eclectic diversity. And I'm interested in continuing the conversation from here.
So Cremorne has around 800 residents living here and around 10,000 workers living here. We do need to make sure that our planning ensures a diverse and eclectic suburb, and it really needs to be master planned. There are lots of planning levers that can be pulled, but we need to make sure that planning powers are restored to the community, that we get property developer donations out of politics, so that our politicians are beholden to their community and not to their corporate donors. And we need to make sure that the planning power is in the community's hands, not in BCAT's hands and not in the minister's hands, who often do the bidding of big property developers. We need to continue to ensure that under the enormous development pressure that Cremorne is facing and will continue to face, that we focus on making Cremorne sustainable, safe, livable, diverse and creative for everyone.
I'll answer the question. I think the planning, we need to give the most flexibility, and that is mixed use, because that puts the power back in the community and the local council. So at the moment, we've got commercial or residential. We don't have any mixed use, so that puts the power back in the community, and only that can attract, the greatest businesses around here, the digital hubs. But it puts the power back in the community and the planning power back in government. And to be clear, I'd be advocating for that and help change that so we can put the power back in the community. At the moment, the Yarra Greens, they haven't asked for that because I think they're anti-business a bit. But that would help the community by having mixed use, and it puts the power back in there. So you can have residential, office space, or residential and integrate. At the moment, it's not. Thank you.
I think it's interesting that Lucas mentioned that he aspires for Cremorne and Richmond to be the next San Francisco. San Francisco has one of the worst inequality in America. It has one of the highest homelessness populations. It's got terrible problems. Its house prices are out of the reach of most people. So I would say, and the reason is because it was overdeveloped far too quickly. The businesses took control of the development and zoning of the city, not the locals. And so I would say we're just about reaching our capacity here in Richmond and Cremorne in terms of how many buildings and workers we can have for the amount of places we have for people to live. So I would say we're just about reaching our capacity. But the way to finely tune the last little bit of our growth is with mixed use development. It just makes sense to me. Thank you.